What is going on, everybody? Shwazy here, and in today's video, as you can see in the title and the thumbnail, I got a little bit of a beef with Dodge, and we're going to talk about it. Okay, so this video is a little impromptu. I actually had a different video planned for today, but based on some recent information that came out, I figured it'd be a good time to talk about this video because it's something I've been thinking about for a pretty long time. So it may be a little bit disorganized, but I decided to hop into the Hellcat and talk about this information and these feelings that I've had about Dodge over the last probably year or so. And the information I'm talking about that was released specifically, which I'm sure you've all heard about, is Ford releasing the all-new 2024 Ford Mustang. Yeah, I mean, that's not really the topic of today's video, but that's really what stemmed this conversation is, you know, Ford released this all-new Ford Mustang, which in my opinion is a pretty good looking car, although I do wish they went a little bit more, not radical, but maybe a little bit more different in their design, because to me it looks just like a facelifted version of the S550 and not really like a new generation, but that's kind of up to you and looks are subjective. And the fact is we still have one coming out. So that's already amazing news because a lot of manufacturers, hint, hint, are axing and killing these all-important American muscle cars. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But the Ford Mustang, the big highlight here, aside from the changes in interior and exterior, is the fact that they are keeping their 5-liter V8 engine with the option to add a manual transmission. Yes, in 2024, where everything else is going electric, or at least cutting and killing the manuals, you can still get a manual 5-liter GT Mustang with that new body style and the latest technology. Thank you, Ford, for listening to what your customers want. Now, we'll get talking about Dodge in just a minute, but I briefly want to talk about Chevy because they're also doing some pretty cool things. Now, unfortunately, the Camaro is pretty much dead, if not dead already, and so they're not really going to have a next generation Camaro. The sales just weren't very good, and I think part of that reason is they may have lost touch with some of their customers and really didn't compete well enough amongst the competition with Dodge and Ford, and it's unfortunate that Camaro is dead. But I will say that they have innovated one particular model, which I'm sure you can guess, to such an extent that it's okay that they're getting rid of the Camaro because this one particular model makes up for it all. And of course, I'm talking about the C8 Corvette. Now, when Chevy released this vehicle about two and a half years ago, it really was a game changer. And even to this day, it still is. I mean, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to find a vehicle with such high performance and such amazing handling and 0 to 60 and mid-engine setup with any other vehicle at the same price point. I mean, they really just knocked it out of the ballpark. They knocked it out of the stratosphere with the C8 Corvette. And so even though they had to kill the Camaro, at least we have a C8 Corvette in the mix. And Chevy isn't done with internal combustion engines. I mean, even Chevy, which is a manufacturer that's all for electrification. I mean, in 2030, I think they're planning on having most of their fleet be electric. They still developed an internal combustion engine on the C8 when it came out, on the Z06, which is just about to come out here in the next year or so. And they're planning on doing an internal combustion electrification mix with a hybrid powertrain here in the next year or so. This hybrid powertrain is likely or rumored to be all-wheel drive and provide upwards of almost 1,000 horsepower on a Corvette, which is just going to be absolutely insane. So they haven't given up on that. And at the same time, they are developing the E-Ray, which is going to be the electric Corvette, and that's going to be an option for somebody who wants to go fully electric. So you're going to have a full suite of choices, whether you want internal combustion, you want the high revving Z06, you want the hybrid with the all-wheel drive, or you want a fully electric Corvette. You're going to have all those options. And now let's jump to Dodge, which, as I'm sure you're aware, they are killing off these Challengers and Chargers and the Hellcat engine and potentially all V8s, is everybody's understanding, as of the year 2023. 2023 will be the last year for all of these big, burly muscle cars that they have essentially rebuilt their name off of in the last 7 or 8 years. So, they're releasing this last call version for 2023 as an homage to send off these internal combustion engines. Now, here's the couple issues I have with everything going on. Now, for anybody that knows me or my channel or on Instagram or whatever social media that you guys communicate with me, you guys will actually know that I'm a pretty big proponent of electrification. I am really one of the few car individuals on YouTube that is totally okay with electric cars. I'm not against them. I see there are definitely advantages to having electric vehicles over internal combustion. But that being said, I think it is ridiculous to assume and also enforce electric vehicles onto everybody. Because as I have reviewed almost every big major electric vehicle on the market, I have noticed that there are multiple use cases where electric vehicles just don't make the cut. A perfect example of that is the F-150 Lightning. It's a wonderful truck, does a lot of things really well, but if you really want to use it for truck-like things where we're talking towing or hauling or long road trips, it's really kind of useless. And so, I will be the first to say that I think there's a great market to have both internal combustion and electric so that you can get the best of both worlds. Because for me, commuting to work, I think it'd be awesome to have an electric vehicle. It doesn't make any noise, it's low cost, low maintenance. At the same time, I think for long road trips or fun adventures or doing some canyon carving, it'd be awesome to have an internal combustion engine. I think there's a world where both of those should exist, but some places, and California in specific, which as of a couple weeks ago made a giant announcement that they are prohibiting any new internal combustion engines from being sold in the state by, I believe, the year 2035. Which in my opinion is ridiculous to enforce and really doesn't make any sense because there are so many use cases where electric vehicles just can't replace internal combustion. The technology is just not there yet. But this video isn't about me talking about internal combustion engines versus electrification. The point of this video is Dodge, instead of developing more internal combustion engines, is going to be developing an all-electric muscle car, which again, I am totally fine with. I think the technology that they released or announced in their concept vehicle was impressive. The vehicle looks impressive. I think it can finally be a competitor to a Tesla, because one of the complaints I have with my Hellcat right now is if I line this vehicle up to like a mid-level Tesla Model 3, not even the performance version, I'm probably going to get smoked. And that doesn't look good for me because I have spent a lot of money on this vehicle and it's a supercharged engine and it's getting smoked by an electric vehicle that's not even meant to be a performance vehicle. So I am totally for creating an electric muscle car that can compete with the Tesla Model S Plaid and can break records on the drag strip. I am totally for that. But what's really angered me is the fact that both Ford and Chevy have not eliminated internal combustion engines, and yet Dodge has. I'm really confused as to why Dodge didn't decide to do some sort of hybrid powertrain like Chevy's doing with their hybrid Corvette, or incorporating a turbocharged V6 engine, which they already have developed. They have something called the Hurricane engine, which is, I believe, a twin turbocharged V6. It's supposed to produce more horsepower than the Scat Pack engine with the 6.4, and it would have been a great replacement for the 6.4 as a next generation model. Even though it's a V6, it would still have some, of that internal combustion sound that the electric cars are missing, and a lot of enthusiasts are really wanting to hear. I don't know why they didn't go that route and maybe add a hybrid powertrain to that Hurricane V6 and create a Hellcat replacement with over 800 horsepower, which I think with today's technology is feasible. But no, Dodge decided to not go that route and entirely eliminate internal combustion engines, which really surprises me because out of all the three main American brands, they're really the first ones you think of about packing tons of power into a vehicle that probably shouldn't have it. And yet they're the first ones to go fully electric when all the other competition still is not. And honestly, I think that's going to be a really big competitive advantage for Ford and Chevy because, I am actively involved in these groups that purchase these types of vehicles. Obviously, me owning a Dodge Challenger, I'm in these forums, in these groups where I am hearing a lot of people who really hate electric vehicles. And the fact that Dodge is entirely putting all their eggs in one basket on this is really concerning to me for their future sales and viability. Perhaps they've been leading us on this entire time, and maybe they will release a V8 or a turbocharged V6 that can at least compare with the Ford Mustang or the C8 Corvette. But from my understanding right now, they have no plans on continuing internal combustion engines. And I think that's going to be a big flaw in their future business plan. Now, the other big complaint and the other topic I wanted to discuss in today's video is the fact that Dodge really hasn't innovated anything in at least the last 5 years. Now, I would even argue and say it's more than that, probably the last 7 years. So in my personal opinion, I think the last big development they ever made was creating the Hellcat engine back in 2015. I think since 2015, Dodge really hasn't done much of anything to innovate or bring new technology into the industry. Now, don't get me wrong, the Hellcat engine, I think, was as big as the C8 Corvette in terms of its progression of technology and competition and just overall wow factor, because that thing, when it came out, was a total game changer. I mean, there was nothing else on the market even close to the Hellcat engine, and Dodge just came in, swung their bat as hard as they could, and I think they won with that strategy. But ever since then, they really haven't innovated or released any new models. The only argument I would say is 2018 when they released the Dodge Demon, which, let's be honest, was really just a derivative of the Hellcat engine. I mean, yes, it's a new engine, it's different, but let's be honest, they wouldn't have been able to develop the Demon engine if they didn't create the Hellcat engine to begin with. So it was obviously reinforced with forged internals and it had a bigger supercharger, but at the end of the day, the Hellcat engine was the foundation of the Demon engine. And even if we consider that the Demon was the next big advancement, that was 5 years ago. And they haven't done anything since then aside from slap some fenders onto their vehicles and add on some different vinyl and badges. And a perfect example, the cherry on top for this, is the fact that this last call version, which is, you know, the last model year of the Dodge Challenger and Charger for 2023, they've released 7 last call edition models. All of those are pretty much just vinyl, paint, and some lipstick. There's not really any innovation with these last call models, aside from just opening up a few different color choices and changing up the seats and the plaques and slapping on some expensive vinyl onto the rear trunk lid. There's really not that much innovation with these last call models that they're really trying to get a lot of hype around. And on top of the last calls, they have these jailbreaks and these red eyes, and they have like 50 different models for essentially the same exact vehicle. The same 4 engines. You either get the Pentastar, the 5.7, the 6.4, or the Hellcat engine with some modifications to get it more horsepower. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all it is, but they're selling it as if it's all new models with the shakedown package or the Super B model. I mean, these are all just ways to extract more money for models that were essentially built on a platform from the mid-2000s. I mean, in the last 2 years or 2.5 years since 2020, Ford has truly released some really amazing and compelling models. I mean, they're game-changing models like the Ford Bronco. You've got the Ford Maverick, which is a super affordable compact truck. You've got the F-150 Lightning. You've got the Mach-E. You've got the Ford Raptor R. You've got now the Ford Mustang. Chevy, on the other hand, is releasing the C8 Corvette, the Z06. They've even got the Hummer EV. And yet, what has Dodge released in the last 7 years or 5 years if you include the Dodge Demon? The answer is absolutely nothing. Actually, I'm sorry, my mistake. They just released the Dodge Hornet, which is a vehicle that nobody really asked for. Just your regular run-in-the-mill crossover that really has no appeal to anybody who purchases Dodge products because it doesn't have some insane engine. It doesn't have its crazy styling. It really is just a regular crossover SUV, which is essentially a copycat of the Alfa Romeo Tonale, or if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It just doesn't seem like Dodge really understood what their market wanted by releasing the Dodge Hornet. I get they're trying to capitalize on crossovers being kind of the new fad, but I really don't think the Dodge Hornet is Dodge's best example of a crossover SUV. And then they released the Chrysler 300C with a 6.4 liter that's already like 10 years old. I mean, there's just really no innovation in that brand. And it's really starting to get me frustrated because they're just essentially re-releasing the same stuff they've had. Now, I get if it's not broke, don't fix it. But when you have competition releasing new generations with impressive internal combustion engines and some really cool looking styling and cool technology, it's hard to compare your outdated Dodge Challenger or Charger with some of the newest tech that's hitting the market. And I really don't think the full electrification is either going to be affordable or a good competitor to some of the other offerings from Chevy and Ford. But I am really curious to hear everybody's thoughts. I think a lot of you out there share the same feelings I do about this vehicle, maybe even a little bit more harsh, because like I said, I am for electrification. I just don't think it's a viable replacement to internal combustion engines. But what do you think about Dodge's approach with going full electrified, especially now knowing that Ford is not doing the same thing? And what do you think of Dodge's new direction with the Hornet and the E-Muscle? Do you think they're going to keep internal combustion engines? Are they just bluffing? I'm really genuinely curious to hear everybody's thoughts. And I want to know if you would consider switching away from Dodge if they really are killing off the ICEs. Well, I really appreciate you all checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that like button. And if this is your first time stopping by, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the weekly car videos. Also, check out all the social media down in the description below. And as always, everybody, I hope you stay schwazy, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Personally, I may go drink a little bit of whiskey so I can cool down from my anger. I'll catch you next time.